During Christmas brunch, my mother-in-law pointed at my daughter's new laptop. "Give it to your cousin. He deserves it more." My daughter looked at me. Then Grandma leaned in. "If you say no, you're out of this family." My husband pushed his chair back, calm, measured, and said one sentence. His parents turned white. If you've ever sat at a Christmas table that looks beautiful from the outside and feels like a held breath from the inside, you already know exactly what kind of morning this was. Patricia and Harold Whitmore did Christmas the way some people do performance art. Every surface deliberate, every detail curated. The napkins were cream linen, folded into those little bishop's hat shapes that nobody actually knows how to refold. The candles were the expensive beeswax kind from the artisan shop downtown, Honeycomb and Company, which Patricia mentioned by name the way you drop a password. The tablecloth was pressed with starch, not steam, a distinction she'd once explained to my face while I smiled like I cared. There were place cards at a family brunch for 8 people who had been eating together for 11 years. I remember staring at mine when we sat down. Renata, my name in Patricia's handwriting, precise, slightly too large, like she'd practiced it. I used to find these details charming, back when I was still trying to find her charming. Now I just found them exhausting, in the specific way that perfectly maintained control is always exhausting. Underneath all that precision is one continuous, low-grade message. I am in charge here. Everything you see exists because I allow it. Michael had grown up at this table. He knew every beat. Lily hadn't. But she was learning. She was 9 that Christmas morning. 9.5. She'd correct you, because the half matters when you're 9. She had her father's dark eyes and my restless hands, and she'd arrived at the Whitmore Christmas brunch with her laptop bag over one shoulder and the particular focused energy of a child who has a project she genuinely cares about. The project was a video, a Christmas montage, 3 weeks of work, pulling clips from our camera roll, digitizing footage from her grandfather's old VHS tapes after watching approximately 40 YouTube tutorials, conducting small interviews with family members who'd let her point the camera at them. She'd added music. She'd color graded it, which at 9 meant moving sliders in iMovie until it looked right. And honestly, it looked right. There was a natural eye in how she'd arranged the cuts. She wanted to show everyone at brunch. That was the whole plan. She'd told me about it in the car, bouncing slightly in her seatbelt the way she does when she's excited. I put in the clip of Grandpa Harold when he was young, Mom. The one from the VHS. Do you think he'll cry? I think he might cry. I told her I thought he might. Michael reached back from the passenger seat without looking and patted her knee. She smiled without taking her eyes off the screen. We pulled into the driveway at 10:52, 8 minutes after the stated start time, which was slightly late by Patricia's standards, but technically on time by any reasonable person's. The house smelled like cinnamon and roasting meat from the front walk. The wreath on the door was fresh. The snow on the hedges was real. It always looked like a Christmas card. We came inside to the usual choreography. Harold emerged from the kitchen in his cable knit sweater, the Aaron one, his Christmas costume, and hugged Michael with the brisk, two-pat warmth of a man who loves his son and doesn't know many ways to show it. He kissed my cheek. He bent down and ruffled Lily's hair, which she tolerated with patient dignity. Her laptop bag held close. Diana was already there, because Diana was always already there. She lived 8 minutes from her parents and had arranged her entire adult life within a perimeter that ensured she never went a full week without seeing them. She stood at the kitchen island in a silk blouse I recognized from her Instagram, where she'd tagged the brand twice. She kissed both my cheeks. "Love your sweater," she said, in the tone she used for compliments that weren't quite. "Thank you," I said, in the tone I used for receiving them. Caleb was at the far end of the room, sprawled in Harold's armchair, scrolling his phone with the particular vacancy of a 13-year-old who has been brought somewhere against his will. Diana's son, fatherless in the practical sense since he was 3, raised in the warm financial orbit of Patricia and Harold in a way that had quietly made him the center of gravity for this family's attention and resources. Never stated, always understood. He didn't look up when we came in. Lily glanced at him briefly, then away. They'd never been close. There was a 4-year gap and a fundamental incompatibility. Lily, last, in the way that hosts do when they last, in the way that hosts do when they want the entrance to register, deep red wrap dress, pearl earrings. She hugged Michael first, always Michael first, a long, weighted hug that carried history and ownership in equal measure. Then me, then Lily, a kiss on top of the head and a quick squeeze. You brought your laptop, Patricia observed. She made a video for the family, I said. She's been working on it for weeks. Something moved across Patricia's face. Not interest, not dismissal. Something neutral and appraising, like she was cataloging it, filing it away. How sweet, she said. And then we sat down for brunch. The food was good, as it always was. Patricia cooked with precision and an underlying need for acknowledgement. Eggs Benedict, a fruit arrangement that looked designed rather than assembled. The smoked salmon things with cream cheese and capers that Michael liked and always ate too many of. Fresh orange juice in a crystal pitcher. Prosecco for the adults, poured by Patricia herself. The conversation moved through its usual channels. The fishing trip Harold was planning. The kitchen renovation Diana was considering. Michael nodded at the right intervals, said the right things, the specific social skill of appearing present while holding yourself slightly in reserve, learned at this table long before I ever sat at it. Lily was quiet, which was unusual. Her hand rested on the laptop bag on the chair beside her, keeping it close. She was waiting for the right moment to show the video. She'd asked me in the car, when should I do it? After we eat, before dessert. I told her to feel it out. Wait for a natural pause. Look for when everyone is relaxed. She was 9.5 years old and already thinking about timing. I remember watching her at that table and thinking, whatever rooms this child walks into for the rest of her life, she is going to figure out how to hold herself in them. I just didn't know yet what it would cost her to learn it. The moment happened between the main course and the fruit, the way these moments always do, without warning, without escalation, just suddenly there, like a trapdoor opening in what had appeared to be solid floor. Patricia set down her fork. She tilted her head. She looked at the laptop bag with the expression of someone who has already made a decision and is now arranging the words to deliver it. That's new, she said. It is, I said carefully. We got it for her birthday. She uses it for her editing. It looks expensive. It was a gift. A beat. Then, Caleb's been having trouble in school. His computer is very old. The non sequitur landed in the middle of the table like something dropped from a height. Nobody picked it up. Then Patricia said, give it to your cousin. He deserves it more. The silence that followed was the specific kind that doesn't mean nothing was heard. It means everything was heard, and nobody knows yet what to do with it. I heard Lily's breath change. A small adjustment, not quite a gasp, but the moment before one. I didn't look at her immediately because I was watching Patricia, trying to read the version of this. Patricia's face told me it was the deliberate version. She was waiting, patient, certain. At the other end of the table, Caleb had looked up from his phone. He was looking at the laptop bag, not at Lily, at the bag, like it was already settled. Diana had gone very still. The stillness she achieves when Patricia does something Diana privately disagrees with, but will not publicly oppose. Harold was studying his plate. Lily had gone the particular pale that fair-skinned children go when something frightens them. Her knuckles were white on the edge of the table. She looked at me, not confused, scared. Not the confusion of a child who doesn't understand what's happening. The fear of a child who understands perfectly and needs her mother to tell her this isn't real. I opened my mouth. Then Patricia leaned closer to Lily. A good granddaughter shares. Lily whispered, do I have to? And Patricia said it. If you say no, you're out of this family. Not joking, not smiling. Said it like a fact, like she was identifying the weather. You could feel the manipulation physically, the compression of it, the specific architecture of threatening belonging to control behavior. It was an old tactic. Michael had lived under it his whole life. Patricia had used it on him in 100 variations across 30 years. The withdrawal of warmth, the suggestion of disappointment, the quiet implication that love was conditional on compliance. But this time, it wasn't aimed at him. It was aimed at his daughter. Michael hadn't moved, still seated, still holding his coffee cup with the same slight grip. But something had changed that I could feel from across the table. Not heat, not anger in the explosive sense, something quieter and more total. The way a room changes when the pressure drops before a storm, not dramatic, undeniable. He set down the coffee cup. He said quietly, "Mom, I'm just saying. Caleb needs—" "You're not just saying anything. You're telling my 9-year-old daughter to give up something that belongs to her." "It's a laptop, Michael. She uses it every day for something she cares about." They went in circles for 30 seconds, the way these conversations always do when the stated issue isn't the real issue, and I think Michael knew that. He'd heard 1,000 versions of this conversation. Give a little. Think about the family. You have more than you need. The quiet redistribution of his own resources and his own space and his own feelings offered back to him as virtue, as love, as the price of belonging. He'd paid it for 30 years. Lily would not pay it for 30 seconds. He stood up, not loudly, not dramatically. The chair scraped back with a sound that was simply definitive, a door closing somewhere in the structure of this family, firm and complete. He stood up and he looked at his mother, and then his father, and then, just for a moment, he looked at Lily. Whatever he saw in her face confirmed something he had already decided. He said, "If she's out of this family for saying no, then so are we." The silence was extraordinary. I mean that in the precise sense, beyond the ordinary. This table had absorbed decades of silence, but not this kind. Not the silence that comes from a genuine structural shift in something everyone believed was fixed. Patricia blinked slowly, like a camera recalibrating. Harold's color drained. I watched it happen, the pink leaving his face in real time, what remained a pale, stunned blankness. Diana's fork was suspended mid-air. She set it down very carefully, as though afraid of the sound. Caleb looked at Michael with something I hadn't expected on a 13-year-old, a clear-eyed recognition that something real had just happened. I've thought about that expression since. I think he knew, on some level, that he'd just watched his cousin be protected in a way that he himself had never quite been, not because no one loved him, but because love in this family had always come with performance requirements, and no one had ever stood up and said, "That condition is not one I will accept." Michael didn't sit back down. "You don't threaten my daughter's place in a family over a laptop." Patricia found her voice, thinner than usual, stripped of its practiced authority. You told her she'd be out of this family? Those were your exact words?" "I didn't mean—" "You said them. The thing about Michael, the thing I fell in love with in his family had always misread as passivity, is that he doesn't argue loudly. He states. He's precise. He uses the words that were actually said, not impressions of them, not approximations. He repeats them back calmly until there is no room to misremember. It's devastating in an argument with someone who relies on ambiguity. Patricia relied entirely on ambiguity. She had none left. "We're leaving," Michael said. He picked up Lily's laptop bag. Not hurriedly. He slid it gently over his own shoulder and then looked at her with the quiet steadiness that is the most essentially Michael thing about him. "Pack up, Lilybird." She stood immediately, gathered her things with the focused efficiency of a child given clear direction in a frightening moment, jacket, small frog-clasp purse, the drawing pad she'd never taken out. She was careful. She was calm. She didn't cry. I was proud of her in a way I can't put into words without it sounding like too little. There are moments when you watch your child hold themselves with more grace than most adults manage, and you think, who made this person? And then you realize they made themselves, out of the materials you gave them and the things they'd figured out alone. And it is the most humbling realization a parent can have. I stood up. I picked up my coat. I met Patricia's gaze briefly. She looked, for the first time in 11 years, genuinely uncertain. Not sad, not remorseful, uncertain. Like she'd pressed a button and gotten a response that didn't match her model. Harold said, "Michael, son, not right now, Dad." We walked out, past the linen napkins and the beeswax candles and the pressed tablecloth and the perfectly curated everything. Through the front hall, past the wreath on the door, down the brick steps, across the driveway, into the car. Seat belts clicked. Nobody spoke for almost a mile. Then Lily said, from the back seat, in a voice very quiet and very steady, "Thank you, Dad." Michael made a sound that wasn't quite words, something low and certain, an answer in a register below language. I watched the houses go past, the accounting. That night, after Lily was asleep, after grilled cheese and tomato soup, because that's what she'd wanted, warm and simple, and ours, Michael sat at the kitchen table with his phone and his laptop open side by side. I made tea. I sat across from him. I watched him scroll through his banking history with the expression of a person doing math they already knew was bad, confirming the numbers, letting the confirmation settle into something real and usable. He'd been sending money to his family for 6 years. Not informally, not occasionally. Regularly, reliably, the way you pay a bill. $700 a month to his parents, which had begun at $500 during a period of Harold's back trouble and had increased in small increments over time, the way costs do when nobody is watching the total. $450 to Diana. Ongoing support through a rough patch that had never technically ended. $250 a month for Caleb's hockey and activities, not because anyone had asked directly, but because the information was always shared at family gatherings in a tone that implied the appropriate response was an offer, and Michael had always made the appropriate response. There was the family phone plan covering 6 numbers, 2 of which were his. There were the emergency transfers, irregular, always urgent, always preceded by, I hate to ask, but that arrived without schedule but reliable as weather. The car repair loan that was never repaid, the security deposit that was never repaid, the school trip that was just gone. He added it up. He wrote the number on a sticky note and set it in the middle of the table. Over $1,600 a month, nearly $20,000 a year, for 6 years. I looked at the number. I looked at Michael. He looked back at me. I knew it was a lot, he said. I didn't, was afraid, he said finally. That if I was afraid, he said finally, that if I knew the number, I'd have to make a decision about it. There it is. The thing he'd been managing all these years, not ignorance, not carelessness, but the deliberate maintenance of strategic ambiguity about the real cost of belonging to his family. If you keep the number just slightly out of focus, you can keep telling yourself it's just what you do. It's just family. It's just, but Lily. But his 9-year-old daughter looking at him across a Christmas table with her hand tight on her laptop bag. That made the number specific. That made it real. He picked up his phone. He opened the bank app. He started canceling the transfers. It was not impulsive. I want to be clear about that. This was not a burst of emotion, a reactive decision, made in the heat of feeling. It was the clarity that sometimes arrives after a long time of knowing something and not letting yourself say it, and the saying of it, even just the numerical saying, the $1,600, the sticky note, had finally made it something he could act on rather than just carry. He canceled the transfers to his parents first, then Diana's, then removed their numbers from the phone plan. He did not cancel Caleb's hockey registration for the current season because Caleb was a child and the season was already underway. He made a note to let it expire without renewal. He was methodical. He didn't narrate it. He just did it the way you do something you should have done a long time ago and have finally simply allowed yourself to do. When he was done, he closed the apps and put his phone face down on the table. I'm not paying people who threaten my kid. The simplest sentence I'd I'd ever heard him say about his family. No qualifications, no apologies, folded inside the decision. No, I know this sounds harsh. Just the bare fact of it. Clean as a bank statement. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. We sat in the quiet kitchen while the maple branch kept its cold rhythm against the window. About time? About time. About time. The response Diana posted the next morning, I won't give it more space than it deserves, but the shape of it was this: a long, emotionally written reflection on family fracture, on the pain of watching people choose anger over love, on a Christmas table where joy had been replaced by selfishness, where a child had refused to share, where a brother had walked away. It was well written in the way that arguments built on strategic omission often are. There was vulnerability in it, sorrow, a kind of bewildered hurt. What it did not contain, the threat, the ultimatum, the specific words a grandmother had delivered to a 9-year-old about her place in the family. The story it told was of a family ambushed by inexplicable overreaction. In an earlier version of himself, Michael would have read it, felt the slow burn of being publicly misrepresented, and let it go. Engaging seemed worse. Silence was cheaper. But he'd already canceled the transfers. He'd already stood up from the table. There was a version of Michael now who had discovered that silence had a cost too, that letting misrepresentation stand, letting the family's preferred narrative overwrite what actually happened, had been something he'd been paying for years without acknowledging the price. He replied once, not long, not heated, precise. He described exactly what Patricia had said to Lily. He quoted it. He noted that the child in question was 9 years old and had been told by her grandmother that refusing to give away her own property would result in expulsion from the family. He described his response, standing up and leaving, as the entirety of the incident from his perspective. Then, I have no interest in financially supporting people who threaten my child. Then, I have receipts. The comments changed tone. There were people who doubled down on Diana's framing. Family is complicated. Children need to learn to share, both sides, which was predictable, and I'd expected it. But there were others who read Michael's response and went quiet in the way people go quiet when the math actually checks out. When a specific load-bearing fact is placed in the center of a sympathetic narrative and the structure of it changes entirely. He said he has receipts. Given what he's describing, I believe him. The post didn't disappear. Patricia never deleted it. Deletion would have been admission. But it became something different than it had been. Not the opening statement of a sympathetic story, but a document sitting permanently beside its rebuttal, available to anyone who found it later. I have receipts. He did. The porch. They came 3 weeks later. Patricia and Harold together on a Sunday afternoon when the snow had stopped and the sidewalks were the gray white of winter that isn't picturesque anymore, just cold. They came without calling, which I suspect was deliberate. Patricia knew that a phone call gave Michael time to prepare a formal position, whereas arriving unannounced allowed for the possibility of catching him in a moment of warmth, of default hospitality, overriding decision. She'd brought a grocery store cake, the large kind with the thick white frosting and the little seasonal decorations, the kind assembled in about 45 seconds at the bakery counter. I saw it when I opened the door and had to work very hard not to say anything, not because the cake was bad, and it was fine, it was a cake, but because the symbolism of it was almost too pointed. 11 years of dinners, 6 years of $20,000 annual transfers, a grandmother threatening a child's belonging, and the proposed repair mechanism was $18 of grocery, store frosting. Michael stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind him. The three of them stood in the winter cold while I watched from inside, not eavesdropping, but needing to see his face. We just want to move forward, Patricia said. It was her opening position, the sentence designed to make accountability irrelevant by positioning the conversation entirely in the future tense. We just want to move forward is a sentence that attempts to skip the part where the accounting happens. Forward doesn't mean backward, Michael said. She tried again. Family is important. These things happen. Children are resilient. Lily probably doesn't even remember it. Michael let her finish. He'd inherited from her, of all things to inherit, the ability to be patient in a conversation, to let the other person exhaust their initial position before introducing the counter. When she stopped, he said, "Here's what I need from you if you want to be in our lives." The sentence changed registers out of the familiar territory of family negotiation, where things are managed and smoothed and nobody says exactly what they mean, into something new, something Patricia and Harold had not been in with their son before, the register of someone who knows his own terms. No more money, not because he couldn't afford it, but because financial support and family membership were going to be two separate things from now on. Supervised visits only for now. No private conversations with Lily about the incident, about family loyalty, about belonging. No guilt tactics, not the subtle kind, not the explicit kind. No public misrepresentation of what had happened. And one more threat. One more time that belonging was held over someone's head. And it was no contact. Patricia listened with her arms slightly crossed, her chin slightly lifted, performing a careful neutrality I recognized as the expression she wore when processing something she found unacceptable but couldn't immediately argue with. When he finished, she said quietly, "You've changed." Michael nodded. "Yes," he said. No elaboration, no defense, just the acknowledgement, delivered as a simple fact. He held the door. He thanked them for coming. He said he'd be in touch. Patricia looked at the door for a moment. Then she and Harold walked back to their car, the cake still in her arms, the frosting slightly dented from being held too long. We brought the cake inside the next day, ate it with Lily on Monday evening. It tasted like frosting and the specific sweetness of a thing that no longer has power over you. After, here is the practical shape of what followed, because the practical shape matters as much as the emotional one. Without the transfers, without the $700 and the $450 and the phone plan and the irregular emergencies, the Whitmore family's financial situation became visible in new ways. The spring vacation they'd been discussing didn't happen. Diana's kitchen renovation got pushed back indefinitely. The rough patch that had required monthly support for 3 years turned out, in the absence of support, to still be a rough patch, one that now required actual addressing rather than subsidizing. I don't say this with satisfaction. I say it because it clarifies what the money had actually been doing. Not helping his parents through a hard time, funding a lifestyle and a set of choices that they hadn't been asked to fund themselves, because Michael had been available and reliable, and had not, until Christmas morning, made his support conditional on anything at all. They needed him. That is a different thing from loving him. Patricia left one voicemail, carefully composed. I'm sorry if Lily was upset, if she hoped they could find a way to repair things. The house felt different without them. Michael called her back the next day, short. He told her he appreciated the call. The door wasn't closed, but the conditions were real. He told her he loved her, which was true in the complicated, geological way that you can love someone while being completely unwilling to continue being treated the way you've been treated. She said at the end in a voice smaller than her usual one, stripped of its practiced authority, I didn't know it had gotten this bad. Michael said, I know, Mom. The most honest moment they'd ever had. Our house is different now. Michael sleeps differently. He'd had a tension across his shoulders for years that I'd mistaken for posture and turned out to be load-bearing. It's gone now, or mostly. Watching it go has been one of the stranger and more moving things I've witnessed in our marriage. Lily edits her films. That's the sentence I come back to when I need to remember why any of this happened and whether it was worth it. She's working on a short documentary about our neighborhood, 3 months of filming, interviews at the corner grocery and the coffee shop and the park. She wants to submit it to a youth film festival in the spring. She talks about it the way she's always talked about her work, with specificity and total absorption, like the project is a living thing she's in a relationship with. She never gave the laptop away. She never had to decide if belonging was worth the cost of her dream. She was 9.5 years old, and someone told her she would be exiled from her family if she said no. And her father stood up from the table and said, "Then so are we." And she got to be in the room when that happened. She got to watch, at 9 years old, what it looks like when someone you love decides your worth is not negotiable. That image, that specific child watching her father stand up. That's the whole story. We took our own Christmas trip this year. A rented cabin a few hours north, in the kind of small mountain town with a diner and an ice rink and a hardware store that's been there since 1947. We brought board games and too much food and Lily's camera. Ate breakfast at 10 a.m., stayed up too late, watched it snow from the cabin windows. Michael made a fire every morning. Lily filmed everything. On Christmas Eve, she showed us the video she'd made of the trip. 4 days compressed into 8 minutes, scored to a piece of music she'd licensed herself through Creative Commons because she'd looked up how to do it. It was gorgeous. Funny in the right places, quiet in the right places. It ended with a long, slow shot of the three of us at the cabin window, watching the snow, our backs to the camera, the firelight making everything gold. I cried. No guilt in the room, no negotiations, no performance, just us. Closing. If you've ever sat at a table where love was used as a threat, you know what it costs, not just in the moment, in the accumulation, in the years of managing and deferring and keeping the numbers slightly out of focus so you don't have to make a decision about them, in the exhaustion of belonging to something that quietly, persistently asks you to be slightly less than you are. Michael paid that cost for a long time. He paid it in money and in himself, and in the way he used to look on the drive home from his parents' house. Not exactly sad, not exactly angry, just slightly diminished. Like he'd left something there he hadn't intended to leave and couldn't locate well enough to ask for back. He's not diminished now. Lily knows her things are hers, and her dreams are hers, and her place in our family is not a privilege that can be revoked. Michael knows he doesn't have to buy belonging anywhere. And Patricia knows, I think she knows, in whatever quiet moments she allows herself, that love isn't leverage. Not with him. Not anymore. The calmest sentence is the loudest boundary of all. He said it with one chair pushed back. He said it with a sticky note and a banking app and a series of quiet clicks. He said it by spending Christmas at a cabin in the snow with his daughter and his wife, watching the fire. Then so are we. 5 words. That was it. That was everything. So, I want to ask you, did he go too far? Or did he finally go far enough? Would you have cut them off completely? Or was supervised contact the right move? Because here's the truth. The moment someone threatens your child's belonging, that's not a family dispute. That's a line in the sand. And sometimes the calmest sentence is the loudest boundary of all. Drop it in the comments. I want to hear from you.